My name is Teach, and this will be part 2 of Understanding the World of Ice and Fire, and this will be all about the coming of the First Men. If you remember, in part 1 I explained to you that the world of Ice and Fire is written from the perspective of Maester Yandel of the Citadel, and I told you that the Maesters aren't exactly to be trusted. The Maesters ultimately have their own agenda and only serve themselves. I also explained a theory I'm going to apply about the word mayhaps. If George uses mayhaps, I believe he's trying to deceive us. But if he uses the word perhaps, I believe there is some truth involved. If you haven't seen part 1, it will be linked up above now. If you remember, at the end of part 1, we talked about the Fisher Queens. The Fisher Queens ruled in this area, which is now known as the Dothraki Sea. So the First Men originated here, and they came across the unbroken arm of Dorne into Westeros. And this brings us to the next chapter, the coming of the First Men. But before we get to the coming of the First Men, let's talk about the last magical creature we didn't get into the last video, dragons.
The Valyrians themselves claimed that dragons sprang forth as the children of the 14 Flames, while in Karth, the tales state that there was once a second moon in the sky. One day this moon was scalded by the sun and cracked like an egg, and 1,000,000 dragons poured forth. In Ash-Eye, the tales are many and confused, but certain texts, all impossibly ancient, claim that dragons first came from the Shadow, a place where all of our learning fails us.
So legend says that dragons either came from the 14 Flames, which are volcanoes, a second moon, which cracked like an egg, and 1,000,000 dragons poured forth, or the tales from Ashai say that dragons came from the Shadow. Now, let's move on to the coming of the First Men.
The coming of the First Men. According to the most well-regarded accounts from the Citadel, anywhere from 8,000 to 12,000 years ago, the First Men came into Dorne via the Broken Arm, which was not yet broken, and as the decades passed, they pushed farther and farther north. Such tales as we have of those migratory days are not to be trusted, for they suggest that within a few short years the First Men had moved beyond the Neck and into the north. Yet in truth, it would have taken decades, even centuries, for this to occur. The First Men soon came to war with the Children of the Forest. Unlike the Children, the First Men farmed the land and raised up ring forts and villages, and in so doing, they took to chopping down the weirwood trees, including those with carved faces, and for this, the Children attacked them, leading to hundreds of years of war.
Before we continue on with this chapter, let's check out some of the other chapters from the Seven Kingdoms section. We're going to spend the next few minutes jumping around the different chapters of the Seven Kingdoms, but we're going to start with Dorne, because Dorne would have been the first place the First Men came to. We're going to skip the first part I have highlighted, but then we'll come back.
In the Dawn Age, Dorne was the first land that they entered, but few remained, as we have chronicled. Many and more pressed on northward, through the mountains and mayhaps across the salt marshes that once existed where the Sea of Dorne is now. The First Men overwhelmed the elder race wherever they met, for the weapons of the children were made of bone and wood and dragonglass. Finally, driven by desperation, the little people turned to sorcery and beseeched their green seers to stem the tide of these invaders.
I'm not really sure what to make of this mayhaps. Is he trying to say that salt marshes didn't exist where the Sea of Dorne is now? Maybe that will begin to make more sense later. But for now, let's move on to the Stormlands.
The history of the Stormlands stretches back to the Dawn Age. Long before the coming of the First Men, all Westeros belonged to the elder races, the Children of the Forest and the Giants. The children made their homes in the vast primeval forests, so Dorne itself and the Stormlands to the north were the first parts of Westeros to know the steps of man. Although the Giants were a shy folk and ever hostile to man, it is written that in the beginning the Children of the Forest welcomed the newcomers to Westeros, in the belief that there was land enough for all. But the true riches of the Rainwood were found in its timber and its rare hardwoods. The harvesting of the trees soon brought the First Men into conflict with the Children of the Forest, however.
But now, let's move on to the Westerlands. In the Westerlands, we have a couple paragraphs about the Casterlys. Casterlys originally founded Casterly Rock.
Yet by far the greatest lords in the Westerlands were the Casterlys of the Rock, who had their seat in a colossal stone that rose beside the sunset sea. Legend tells us that the first Casterly lord was a huntsman, Corlys, son of Castor, who lived in a village near to where Lannisport stands today. When a lion began preying upon the village sheep, Corlys tracked it back to its den, a cave in the base of the rock. Armed only with a spear, he slew the lion and his mate, but spared her newborn cubs, an act of mercy that so pleased the old gods that they sent a sudden shaft of sunlight deep into the cave, and there, in the stony walls, Corlys beheld the gleam of yellow gold, a vein as thick as a man's waist. The truth of that tale is lost in the mists of time, but we cannot doubt that Corlys, or some progenitor of what would become House Casterly, found gold inside the rock and soon began to mine there. To defend his treasure against those who would make off with it, he moved inside the cave and fortified its entrance. As years and centuries passed, his descendants delved deeper and deeper into the earth, following the gold, whilst carving halls and galleries and stairways and tunnels into the rock itself, transforming the gigantic stone into a mighty fastness that dwarfed every castle in Westeros. Though never kings, the Castlys became the richest lords in all of Westeros, and the greatest power in the westerlands, and remained so for hundreds of years. By then, the Dorne Age had given way to the Age of Heroes.
Now, let's move on over to the Riverlands. Okay, in the Riverlands, we only have one short paragraph.
During the long centuries when the first men reigned supreme in Westeros, countless petty kingdoms rose and fell in the Riverlands. Their histories, entwined and embroidered with myth and song, are largely forgotten, save for the names of a few legendary kings and heroes whose deeds are recorded on weathered stones in runes, whose meanings are even now disputed at the Citadel. Thus, while singers and storytellers may regale us with colourful tales of Artus the Strong, Florian the Fool, Nine-Fingered Jack, Shara the Witch Queen, and the Green King of the God's Eye, the very existence of such personages must be questioned by the serious scholar.
So once again, the Maesters are arguing over stuff. And there's a few colorful characters that the singers tell us about. I'm really curious about this Green King of the God's Eye. Let's see if we can't figure out who he might be. Before we can finish this chapter on the Riverlands, we have to talk about war. At this point, the First Men are at war with the Elder races. They're trying to push the giants and the children of the forest out of Westeros. And let's face it, when it comes to war, humans are awful, especially the Lannisters. They rape, pillage, and plunder, and burn everything that's in their way. So what do you think the First Men would do when they find the God's Eye? They would go out to the Isle of Faces. And there, that must be the home of an old god, the Mother Earth character that the children worship. And what do you think the men would do to her? They would rape her too. But luckily for her, one man probably stood up and took pity on this beautiful goddess. He takes her to Mount Caelin, where she eventually gives birth. While she tried not to scream, she just couldn't help it. And then she cracks a little piece of the ice moon. And now the ice moon falls way to the north. So when she originally screamed, the fire moon broke and rained all over the world and rained black stone everywhere, with a large chunk landing near a shy. Some of it clearly must have landed on Valyria as well. Dragons came from the broken fire moon, and they went and they roosted in a shy by the shadow, and Valyria in the 14 flames. And also, there's a black stone down in Old Town. Dragons might have came to roost there as well. We'll cover that in the next episode, though. Wow, did you make it to the end? If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to join the discussion, we have a Discord, and it will be linked in the description below. If you don't know what else to watch, check out one of these videos linked at the end, and don't forget to join me for the next one. Once again, my name is Teach, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.